Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 3,535 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. Well, the time has finally come for this video. We are not talking about Xbox 360 games, we're talking about PS3 games. However, we're talking about it because these are games that are on the 360 that for whatever reason, I bought on the PS3. So while it is technically not a 360 video, the intention is that I wish I had these games on the 360. That also means that some of these games I haven't tried out because to play my PS3 is a big mess. It's the only system I don't have easy access to play. But a lot of these I actually picked up years ago, and it's funny. For some reason, there was a time where I thought I should get the games on the PS3 over the 360 because the PS3 was more powerful. But after looking into it, hearing from people, and finding out that because the games generally were designed having to be on the 360, it made them run better on the 360. So we're going to talk about a bunch of games that I wish I had on my Xbox 360. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
Alright, so starting off today, we're going to talk about a game that I've seen requested in the comments a couple of times, and I would have talked about it before now, but I have it on the PS3, and that game is Catherine. Now, I've actually beaten Catherine. I played it on the Switch, I guess the remake slash reboot for Catherine Full Body, where it's the same game, but then they add a third love interest in it. So you have Catherine with a C, Catherine with a K, and then you have a girl named Rin, who's got pink hair. But for the most part, it's still the same game, and it's a very interesting game. It is an Atlas release. Now, I haven't played it on the PS3, but I know there's an Xbox 360 version as well, and I really enjoyed playing it. Now, it is one of those things where playing through it, you feel like an absolute scumbag, because if you know anything about the game, it's about you cheating on your significant other. Though, I will say there's a caveat in there. You don't really see any explicit anything, but it is implied heavily. Now, there's multiple endings to how the game plays out. I'll leave it at there because it is a pretty cool story. But what happens is every night when you go to bed, you have these nightmares where you're a sheep person, and everyone else who's cheating on their spouses or their significant others as well are there, though I think it's just men. So it's all the men who are doing it. They're in this area, and you're forced to climb a tower that you can interact with. So there's certain rule sets to the towers where you can move X block, you can set this block, you can jump up here. And it sounds shallow on the concept, but as you start going, it gets a really deep. It's almost a puzzle platformer, but a vertical one. And then you'll have levels where you have bosses chasing you, so there is a time limit. There is different things you can achieve as far as points by doing less moves, doing riskier moves. You know, if you push a block and then it drops a bunch, kind of like Jenga, it drops a bunch of blocks down, and then you now have a pathway. So it's one of those things where it can get very intricate and annoying if you're trying to be a completionist, but if you're trying to beat the game, it's manageable. It's manageable. And in between these nightmare sequences, which this is the only significant gameplay, everything else that occurs in the game is largely like a visual novel, point-and-click adventure. You can choose your responses, and how you respond to Catherine with a C or Catherine with a K will affect how the game plays out. To an extent, there are certain beats that will happen regardless, and yes, while I am familiar with the full body edition, it is largely based on the architecture of this game, so I do feel confident enough to speak to this one as well. Highly recommend it. This was one of those games where I was looking for it forever at GameStop from like 2015 to 2020 or whatever it was I picked it up. And it always was like a $20, $30 game. And that just seemed insane to me. I never really saw it on the 360. Every time I saw anyone mention Catherine, they were talking about the PS3 edition, and that is the one I ultimately got it on. Years later, I then realized it was on the 360, and you'll see it with different cover arts. There's a special edition of this game that comes with boxers and all, because when you're going through the different tower, I think you're just in your heart boxers. Think of like the things they're wearing in Ghosts and Goblins. But overall, phenomenal game, phenomenal gaming experience. And the nice thing about this recommendation is that you can play it on the 360, the PS3, or you can get the remake, the full body edition, if you want a little bit extra content. And it's still fairly easy to come by. So highly recommend this one. If you guys are wondering my thoughts on Catherine, it's a fun game. Just know that you, depending on get through to the end, because it's one of those things where you're playing as a very unlikable person. They're a complete scumbag. Especially if I played this game when I was 21, I probably could have related to it a lot more than when I played it when I was 34. And at the time, you know, with the wisdom of age, especially in these kind of matters, it's very obvious what should have happened. But then as you get through the game, you're like, oh, okay, maybe everything wasn't as it seemed. But anyways, phenomenal game. One I highly recommend checking out if you have any at all interest. And it is definitely something that it's not something I see infinite replayability, but there's a lot of substance to this, even if you aren't really turned on by the whole story. If you just want to play it, the gameplay is fun too. All right, now here's one that I got, I want to say the same time as Catherine, and I wanted to get this game on the 360, but I could never find it on the 360. And that seemed strange to me because this was a series that was huge on the PS1. And as far as I thought, this version was the third game. Apparently it's not. And so I know I was at GameStop and they had one of those buy two, get one free deals. And finally, I just said, you know what, I'm going to get it. And of course I dropped the game. And that game is Driver San Francisco. Now, this is a very hard game to come by, and I wish I had it on the 360, because the 360 version's like $60, $70 complete. I picked it up for about $17. I got it with a couple of the other games on this video here today. And what makes this cool is this was, so once again, I'm originally from the Bay Area, so the thoughts of driving around San Francisco is cool. I really enjoyed the first Driver on PS1. I loved the second Driver on PS2. And then Grand Theft Auto 3 came out, really stole Driver's lunch by providing a out-of-the-car experience and a much better story, in my opinion, as well as a way where you could get away from the cops, which I don't know if Driver ever had that. It was a lot harder to reduce your threat level in that than it was. Like, GTA did a much better job of gamifying the whole experience of being in a sandbox and playing around. Though Driver had the really cool instant replay where you could see people coming up behind you, etc. But anyways, this game was the last release in the series, and from all accounts, it's a really, really good game. It just kind of got overshadowed. By this point, they're still having you in the car. Now, they introduced a new mechanic in this where you can actually, I think you die at the beginning of the game and then you possess people. So it's funny, I've talked about this before on other videos. I think I was talking about Geist, where I really like the concept of being able to possess people and then bounce around to other enemies or other people and then become them. Mind Jack was that way. There's a game on the N64 called Space Station Silicon Valley that has that mechanic. But I always don't end up playing these games. But that's how this one plays, and it's very expensive. It's expensive on the PS3. It's expensive on the 360. And more than any of these games we're going to talk about today, this is the one I wish I had on the 360 more than any of them. Just because this is something I would definitely sit down and check out, as I really enjoyed the Driver series. And I thought Driver San Francisco was the third one, but I think there's a Driver 3 on maybe the PS2. And then this was, I guess, the fourth one. I don't know. Correct me in the comments. But yeah, those are the first two that we're talking about. Here's one that I picked up when I originally got the PS3. This is when I was trying to experience a lot of different games. And I think this was a recommendation from, like, a Metal Jesus recommendation, something like that, where they said, oh, this game was great. I believe I had played Skyrim, and Elder Scrolls already at this time. So I thought I'd check out their other big franchise, which was Fallout 3. And I just didn't get it. I just didn't enjoy it. You know, you start off in the vault, you go above ground, you're in the wasteland. The gunplay is interesting, how you can target areas, but then it seemed like a very heavily, PC RPG, Western RPG influence, where you can kind of get yourself in trouble before you realize it. There's no easy way to grind. There's lots of mechanics on top of lots of mechanics. They don't do a great job of ramping it up. And so I just didn't enjoy it. But I do wish I had it on the 360 and not the PS3. It's one of the few games that, it's dirt cheap. I could get it. I don't know why. But I'm kind of like, in this video, I'm just talking about all the games I have on the PS3 that I also could get on the 360, and I do hope to eventually shift over there. And this is one of them. And what's funny is that what has me wanting to give this another shot now is, ironically, the damn Fallout TV show. Now, I'm not saying the Fallout TV show was great. But I will tell you, as someone who is starved for video game media that at least is competent, it at least was competent. Walter Goggins was incredible in it. The main character was likable. Up until the last episode where they completely ruin one of the characters they set up so well in the first episode. It was fun. It was a fun ROM. I mean, it's got the last episode, like, it really weird how they make the main villain very sympathetic and the real hero. Anyways, not to get off in a tangent, but it has me wanting to dive more into this universe, which I think was the intention of the show. So well done. Well done. Much more so than, say, the Halo show, which made me never want to play another Halo game after what they did. At least this one seemed to represent the universe. Now, if you ask Fallout fans, they say it's horrible. But at least there's a bit of a debate there, and it was watchable. It shows you the state of video game adaptations and it's also not a franchise I'm invested in. So what are you gonna do? I can't pretend to be invested when I'm not. All right, another one that I wish I had on the Xbox 360, which is getting up there a little bit. I got this at the same time as I got the Driver game, and this is one I regretted not picking up for cheap. I could have gotten this way earlier than when I eventually did get it, and that is the Metal Gear Solid HD Collection. And if I remember, this was Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and then Peace Walker. And the main reason why I picked this up was for Peace Walker. I already had played 2 and 3 on the PS2, but Peace Walker, I believe, is a PSP game, or not Vita. I think it had to be PSP or something like that, where it was a game that that was not released on consoles before. And so I wanted it for that. But like I said, I don't have an easy way to play my PS3. By the time I got a PS3, the PS4 literally came out the next year. So my window of playing PS3 games was razor thin. And even now, when I go back to this generation, as I've talked to so many times, I much prefer the experience playing an Xbox 360 game. I enjoy the controller more. Not a fan of the 6-axis controller. But I'm glad to have this. Although, ironically, I just picked up the PS5 game that I don't think it has 3, though, or Peace Walker. So, because it had the MSX games on it. It's funny, I buy these things for such stupid reasons, right? And even then, I'd probably much prefer to play the original MSX game, but I am not getting into the world of Japanese computers. But yes, this is another one that I didn't even know was on the 360. Once again, I should have got it for the 360, but I picked it up at the same time as I got Driver San Francisco, and another one that I'm glad to have. And then the final game I got in that buy two, get one free deal was one that I struggled to decide on. And I finally just said, all right, whatever. It's a Castlevania game. I knew at the time the second one was divisive, but I had no idea that the whole thing was divisive, especially if you ask Castlevania fans like my buddy Mike Tendo. But that is Castlevania Lords of Shadow. So it's funny, when this came out, to people who weren't in the know with the series, this looked like a huge success. All I heard was that it was great, it was a lot of fun, really did the 3D Castlevania formula right, which like I said, I missed most of the PS2 era as far as being in the know, but I know Castlevania 64 was a disaster, the Game Boy Advance games were popular, and then that was kind of the last I heard of it before this series came out, which basically retconned everything, so it completely messed with the timeline, which seems to be something that happens a lot now. That got started, 2013, 2012-ish when that came out, I think. Then the sequel came out, and that's the one that everyone hated. But this one kind of pulled a Force Awakens, where people were willing to give it a shot. And then there are some fans of this. Now, why am I even talking about it? Because I went on the 360. I really would rather play this on the 360. I'd rather play the sequel on the 360. I know there's a DLC only game, kind of like a side-scrolling game, but I think it's included on one of the versions that's on the case. Although knowing the 360, it's a DLC code. Maybe I should get the PS3 version because it's on there. Anyways. But it looks like a fun hack and slash, and I'm not the big, I love Castlevania, don't get me wrong, but I'm a little bit more forgiving of variances in these universes coming from, say, The Legend of Zelda, where literally every single game, even though everything is the same, everything is different. Over the years, you're seeing more and more regular players come in. But it is one of those things where I'm willing to, I don't care about the Zelda timeline. They're all their own siloed games. But ultimately, they always try to bring everything together. And thank you, Marvel. Thank you for making everything a shared universe. Because I really could care less about these. These were all individual stories. Now everything's intertwined. But anyways, another one. Wish I had on the 360. Okay. And here's one, actually, you know what, I did misspeak. This is a game that I did pick up recently on the 360, and I talked about it a couple weeks ago. It is ridiculous, and I loved it, but when I was looking for 360 games back in March and April, I panic buyed this on the PS3 because it was the only place I could find it somewhat reasonably, and that was Ride to Hell Retribution, which apparently this came with a DLC code for the sushi kind of bonus mission, but the way it works is it's in the back of the manual, if it had it, and mine did not have the code, so I bought the DLC for the 360 before the store went down, and I had not planned on getting it for the 360, or at least not unless I could find it super cheap. But because I had the damn DLC on the 360, I finally bit and bought the game. Although I got it for a deal. I got it for like $20 or so. Because as I said, the prices have come down. Now's the time to buy, guys. Now's the time to buy. These are going to go back up. This is most certainly the current floor. Now, if you don't believe me, that's fine. And if they never go up, that's even better. Because then I can keep buying these. But I just, based on what I've seen in collecting, especially where we're getting at to right now, I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, gameplay-wise, I've talked about this. It's ridiculous. It's really a broken, janky game. I'm someone who appreciates that, but you may not be. And it's not something I could recommend to anyone who doesn't, say, like watching horrible B movies just to laugh at it. But even then, there's a limit to that. So even myself, when I finally put the controller down, it was at the point of like, okay, I've had enough to deal with this game. So it might be one of those things where you need to play it with a guide in order for its jankiness not to completely ruin everything. Alright, another one that I played a lot of this game on the NES, and they made a remaster for it. At the time, I believe it was DLC or download only, and then a physical version of it came out a couple of years later. And I always wanted it for the Wii U. I may have even bought it for the Wii U, to be honest. But there was a version on the 360 and the PS3. And I found this at a swap meet recently. The local swap meet I did back in May. I got it for like $10 or so. And it's surprisingly hard to come by. It's one that was delisted. And it is the DuckTales Remastered. And what's cool about this is a nice... It changes some of the things from the game, but it's also a pretty faithful remaster. It uses the voice actors from the cartoon, which I was a huge fan of the cartoon. And I don't really remember playing the NES game, but I do remember playing it, if that makes sense. Like, I always talk about how I've been playing games since the age of 2. One of those games was definitely DuckTales, because we had it. I have a CIB version of it on the NES. My older brother had it. But I don't remember the music. I don't remember the levels. But I have these ingrained moments in my head, either from watching my older brother or actually playing it, of the pogo stick mechanic, being in like an underground area where all the walls were brown and you were kind of in these almost Dig Dug-like carved patterns. And it's so strange to me. I don't have many games like that where I don't really have a vivid moment of remembering playing it. But DuckTales is one of them. DuckTales is one of them that I know I played a lot, and I, for the life of me, can't remember any of it. Like, I remember playing Rampage. I remember instances of playing Rampage. I remember playing Zelda 1, Zelda 2, even games like Trojan. But DuckTales was so funny when I really started heavily getting into the collecting scene, even though I've been collecting my whole life, but when I really got into the scene circa 2013, 2014, whenever anyone talked about DuckTales, it just didn't click. It didn't click at all. And then I remember when when my brother allowed me to keep his games and seeing that, oh, wow, we had DuckTales. You know what? I do remember playing, like, it's so fun. TMNT 2, it was that way. That was like that too. TMNT 2. I don't really remember playing that, but that was the same. Anyways, like, I'm not even talking about the game. It's DuckTales. It's a remastered version of DuckTales, and it's competent. Wish I had it on the 360, but there you go. Another PS3 game I have for you. Now, here's one of probably the most recent one I bought on the PS3 that I stupidly should have gotten on the 360. So I want to say I picked this up last year, and it's just one of those things where I'm talking about sequels or sequels or oddities or games in the franchise that I wasn't aware of, or that just you may not be aware of. And one of my favorite series is XCOM, Enemy Unknown, the remakes of it. I've never played the older PC games. I'd like to. I know that's in my intro too. It's kind of a joke when I hold it upside down. But when they made XCOM, the Bureau Declassified, this is what I thought XCOM was when I saw the original, not the original, the 2012 game. I thought it was going to be another first-person shooter, had zero interest in it, and then my director at the time was like, oh yeah, you should look at that. That's like an RPG, a turn-based game. I'm like, excuse me. Absolutely loved it. And then they announced a like a sequel, but it wasn't a sequel. It was a damn first-person game, and no one played it. It did not do well. It did not look all that interesting, and I didn't get it. Finally, I ended up picking it up just because I wanted to have it in case this became a hard-to-find game, and it's not. It's still like there's a copy of it on the 360 at my local game store for like $10. I should just pick the damn thing up, but it's really, I don't know about you guys, but it was easier for me to pay more to get a copy of Ride to Hell Retribution than it is to buy a cheaper game. Kind of like Fallout 3 or this game where it's like, man, am I going to waste $5 or $10, or can I use that on something I really want? That's kind of why I haven't gotten it. But after looking into the gameplay of this, it does keep some of the XCOM DNA in it, where you can guide your different troops, and there's little squares, they take pot shots, so it is an interesting, it almost feels like you're a first-person experience within an XCOM match, which now seeing that has me a little bit more hyped to go back and play it. And once again, that's kind of why I wish I had the 360 right now. Because this one, Driver, I would have been playing. You had already heard me talk about these games before today if I had it on the damn 360. Alright, getting down to the last few. So this is one of the first games I picked up when I got a PS3 back in 2013-ish. This was definitely a Metal Jesus Rocks recommendation. And that is Nier. Now, what's funny is I picked this up, I played it, and I honestly didn't care much for it. I really just, it was one of those things where it seemed so daunting. It was like, oh god, I have like a 70-hour experience in front of me. Didn't really connect with the gameplay or the character. You start off, it's a very stark, contrasted world. You're this big, brooding, beefy, gray-haired guy, but not the same charisma of, say, Geralt of Rivia. And it's so out there that I lost interest in it. Ironically, Nier Automaton came out a few years later, and that game I actually played everything. I beat all the endings. I played through the whole thing. It's a fun game. I think it's definitely far more loved than it deserves to be, in my opinion, which may have to do with the character designs, but hey, more power to you. But Nier is definitely one that I regret buying on the PS3 because I would like to give it another shot. I just wish I had it on the 360. And it's not one I ever come across on the 360. I can't tell you I've ever seen a copy of it in the wild. I don't ever remember seeing it in GameStop. It was the same thing when I found out it was on the PS3. It's not something I've ever seen or ever saw. So one that maybe I'll find someone who wants to trade a copy of it. I don't think it's that expensive yet. I mean, when I got this back in, 2015, it was about a $15-$20 game, and I think it's around there. It may have crept up to 30 or 40. I don't know. But just another one that I really am bummed I have on the PS3 because stupidly, I know, I'll have to get to these PS3 games eventually because there are ones that are exclusive to it I'd like to check out, so maybe I'll play them around them. But man, it would make it easier for me, and I enjoy the way the 360 games look on a shelf more too. All right. Another one that I picked up, this was a recommendation from my buddy Avalanche Jared. He did a video, I can't remember if it was just lesser known RPGs or something about turn-based RPGs, but this one was one that I'd never heard of. I think he covered it on the PS3. I didn't even know it was an Xbox 360 game. Sometimes when you search for these games too, you would get hoodwinked by the fact that the PS3 game was more expensive than the 360. So then it even makes you as a collector be like, oh, well, obviously I need the PS3 version. The 360 one must be trash. It's so cheap. Now the inverse of that's kind of happening now, which is kind of crazy. Things like, like Driver San Francisco, I think is more expensive on the Xbox than it is on the PS3. I mean, will this balance out when the PS3 store does eventually close? Maybe. But I do believe that the 360 is this way because it is a more popular system. Even though the PS3 sold more, it's kind of like the way I got a PS3. I was never invested in the PS3, but by the time I got one, there was necessary experiences to play. You needed to play the Uncharted, you needed to play the Last of Us, you needed to play God of War 3, you needed to play Demon Souls. So these games were just must-haves, and you couldn't do that on the 360. Versus the 360, by the time the end of the generation, there was Halo and there was Gears. There was nothing really that you needed to play on the 360. And then kind of, the paid online. Anyways, we're speculating here. But the game, God, I'm talking about Resonance of Fate. Jeez, I went off on a tangent. So Resonance of Fate, I didn't know it was a 360 game. But it was a very strange looking RPG, and I believe Jared said it was not a great game, but it was one that was unique enough. It's got a really cool battle system. I think it's a gun battle system where it's in real time, but then it's not. And it's just, it was another one of those things that it feels like a PS3 game. And I don't know if you guys ever have this notion, but like things like Nier, Resonance of Fate, it just seemed like it was more PS3 than 360 versus 360 seemed a little bit less like slick with that, where you had more just rough and tough machismo, Gears of War. But that might just be my own mind just being weird. But yeah, another one I want to pick up on the 360. I actually might be pulling the trigger on that. I found a good deal on one that I'm waiting to see if I win an auction on. So that should be closed by the time this video goes up. If I have it, well, you'll see it here in a few weeks because I have found a trove of more games. So I'm pretty much up at the limit here. I wasn't able to play anything new this week because I'm all out. But I have several new ones coming in the pipe for at least another video. And a couple other ideas to talk about some stuff too. So yeah, more content coming. Sorry guys who are over the 360. I'm not yet, but we're getting there. All right, this was one that I saw recommended. So when the FOMO first started hitting, I was following a lot of other people who were doing Xbox 360 videos, from The Void, and a couple other guys. Sorry guys, I can't remember everyone's name. There was like Garbage YouTuber or something. But then a guy called Resell Robin, I saw him, and he's still doing a bunch of stuff. He's not really doing 360 videos anymore. But one of the games he recommended was a game called Damnation. And I think it might have even been in a PS3 video. And I could not find this game on the 360, but I was able to find it on the PS3 for like $10. And it just looked like a fun, alternate, almost universe timeline where you're playing as a badass with a gun, like pretty generic fare. Like this will blend in, I imagine, with a lot of the other first-person shooters I've played. Things like, the one with the Sphinx and everything. God, what was that called? It was Legendary. Yeah, same things like Legendary. Like, it looks like that caliber of game, but it also looks like it could be pretty damn fun. So, one that I am still debating if I pick up on the 360, because I haven't seen it. I literally have not seen it everywhere. When I go to these swap meets, I'm still having it in the back of my head. Am I going to come across one of these? Never do. Never do at all, which is a shame. All right. Then the last game we have here, now this one is the most frustrating because I picked up all 3 of the games in this series last year with the intent of beating the first 2. Those were on my backlog to beat back when I started and said I was going to do a backlog this year, which unfortunately I got derailed by the 360 content. But I did make it through a decent amount of them. But I was told not to play the 3rd one, and then I was told to play the 3rd one. And that game is Max Payne 3. And once again, another one I didn't know had a 360 version. If I did, I probably would have picked it up. But it just, for me, Max Payne sounds and feels like a PlayStation series. You know, I know it's a PC series, but for me it seems like a PlayStation series because I would see the damn PS2 games everywhere or at least the first one. The Max Payne 1 you see all the time. I never really saw Max Payne 2. But Max Payne 3, dirt cheap games, like $5-10. I actually bit the bullet and bought a damn copy of Max Payne 3 on the 360, but it comes with 2 discs. And when I got it, the first disc was broken. It was one of the only times I got hoodwinked. It was a deal I bought off Price Charting of all places. And the guy was complaining, claimed the disc was fine. This thing looked like it had been resurfaced by Cheeto dust. He was saying it was a perfectly clean disc, and I sent him a picture back of it and be like, that's not clean, and he never responded. Luckily, PayPal stepped in. Got my $10 back, but still, to this day, I'm looking for a disc 1 for Max Payne 3. I have disc 2, the bonus disc, or the multiplayer disc, and I have a case and manual, but I need disc 1. And funnily enough, I can't seem to find it for more than $10, which I don't mind. You know, I'd buy a disc 1 for $4 or $5, but $10, another, like, I don't know, this seems a little much. So yeah, I still have no way of playing this on the 360, and I have it on the PS3. Like I said, I have bitten the bullet on a couple of these, but really interested in seeing this because of the kind of the back and forth I've heard of. It's a good game, it's not a good game. So let me know what you guys think about Max Payne 3. I did get a bunch of the DLC for it for free on the 360, which was a lot. There was like 3 or 4 gigabytes of it, which is insane when you consider the file storage sizes of a lot of these things if you weren't installing the game on disc. But anyways, there you go. I think that was 12 games. So there's 12 games that I stupidly got on the PS3 that I should have got on the Xbox 360, which is a great backdoor reason to label this as a 360 video. How'd I do, guys? How'd I do? Sorry to technically talk about a different console, though I do have some PS3 games I will talk about eventually. And I'm just really enjoying doing this. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for all the nice comments. Be nice to people. I know we had a comment last week that was asking me I don't actually beat the games. Like, yeah, I don't beat all these games. I'm covering 10 plus a week. I would like to. Generally, it's funny, one of the bigger series that kind of popped off last year was I would do videos called Games I Gave Up On, because traditionally, I will force myself to beat a game even if I'm not enjoying it. And I've kind of reeled back on that a little bit lately. But I'm still like that. When I'm going in to play a game, I'm going to beat it because sometimes a game will get better. It'll hook you. And I know that's not for everyone, but I have a lot of patience with that. And I find that it's paid a lot of dividends. And it also shows you kind of why I enjoy the type of games I do. So I'm not a big fan of fighting games, puzzle games, sports games. It's more or less the experience you have in minute 1 is going to be the experience you have in minute 100, other than your skills will be better. However, in games where it's ability based or strategy based, your experience in minute 1 versus your experience in minute 100 completely different. And then your experience in 150 could be completely awful. Like Dialfield Chronicles, I talked about that. How that was a game that started on a high, went low, went very high, and then to get the Platinum Trophy, which I never do. I'm not a trophy hound, I'm not an achievement hound, but then this one I decided to do it just because. That really made the experience boring, very boring, because I was just doing the same thing over and over again. But I enjoy seeing how a game lives and breathes that way, which makes these, and why I don't say I'm reviewing these. These are snapshots, first impressions. The only games I technically are reviewing in this thing would be something like Catherine, or if I've beaten the game. But yes, you can still provide thoughts on something, even if you're only playing it for an hour or two. But take it with a grain of salt, and that's why I always couch it with, I may be missing something. I even got that last week where someone said I was missing out on Wolverine because the game maybe got deeper. But my argument on that was just some of the fights with the fire guy, especially, where I just felt like I was hitting a brick wall while I'm the guy who's supposed to be super powerful and impervious to pain and can regenerate health. It really broke the fantasy of the character. But anyways, enough of my tangents. Thank you guys again for tuning in. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.